Hey, Miguel.
Jelmer, welcome. Jelmer, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you guys and everyone around the world from the Netherlands, The Hague. Very proud to be here.
Excellent. Excellent. And I'm in Denmark, so we're two people based in Europe, but I think a lot of our team is based in the US and in the UK and different places. So really interesting. Jelmer, thank you for joining us today. The topic or the trend that we're talking about in this session is entering the golden age of on-demand event content. Now, I'd love to get your perspective as someone who talks a lot about content and who deals with a lot of event content. What does this mean, the golden age of on-demand event content? What does this trend mean for you?
Right. Well, we have an event platform and we've seen firsthand how our customers are, during the pandemic, live streaming their sessions, some live and some pre-recorded and then streamed live, and then made available for on-demand access. And this has been almost so natural to this whole virtual event era that we've been in the last 18 months. And I'm seeing our customers getting almost addicted to the kind of content they're creating and starting to see the value of the engagement that happens around that content when they make it available for on-demand access. And I think along with my customers, that this is clearly a trend moving forward where we're going to see much more impact of on-demand content in events and the communities they engage.
Absolutely. But I mean, obviously, this is a great opportunity because we are recording, we're creating everything digitally. But what leads you to believe that this is a trend now and that it's going to kind of ramp up in 2022?
Right. Well, like I said, content creation comes almost natural to now, at least in the virtual event era. Moving forward, our customers are telling us that they are keeping the virtual component in their conference designs moving forward, and their event designs moving forward. 2022 is starting to look a lot like 2021, with continuous waves coming up and down, and the continuing uncertainty there is. But even beyond 2022, live hybrid versions of events will keep an online component, because I believe a clear trend is that the superpowers, if you like, of live in-person events that we all know so well from the pre-COVID era, and we long so much to get back to, plus the superpowers that we've discovered of the virtual online conferences. Now, finally, we have a chance to make them come together. And a very important element of that is the engagement around the on-demand content.
Very interesting. Okay. So, really what you're seeing is there are in-person events happening, but there's always a virtual or an online component. And this content, this kind of on-demand content, is becoming a more important part of events, and really across the board, you're seeing that being, a big part of what the event is all about.
Absolutely. So right now, in-person events bring in online participants, right? So just as a way to allow people who can't travel to the conference and to the event to join. But we've also seen how our customers are organizing different types of events. For instance, I think give two examples. We have a few customers who really let go of an event needs to take place during, let's say, 3 days of intense programming. Instead, spread it out across a couple of months with an afternoon program now and another afternoon program 2 weeks from now, making the content available to be digested for the, let's say, 2 following weeks. So there's a better cadence, and also it allows for, let's say, better. I'm going to say digesting the content so you can follow up more properly with the speakers. So that's one, let's say, trend that I'm seeing. The other trend or type of event design that we're seeing is the flipped classroom model, where the organizers are really trying to get the best out of the in-person part by allowing attendees to pre-conference view the content digest it, prepare their questions, and then engage with the speakers live on site, and have a more proper way of spending the time together, instead of just watching the session in a way they could just as well have done prior to the event online. And this really drives that kind of value that's embodied in the content, and unlocks it almost to create more, I'm going to say, return on the investment everybody's making, whether it's a time investment or a money investment, to get more value out of that event.
Sure. Now, this sounds quite interesting, and I'd love to hear from our audience. And if you have any comments, please add them in the chat. I'd love to hear if you've tried the flipped classroom model, and just so I'll try to unpack maybe the flipped classroom model very quickly. I think the idea is that you show the content that you're going to talk about at a session before the session, right? You kind of show all the content that you have, and then you use the coming together of people to discuss the content that you watched at your leisure, on your demand. So I'd love to hear from anybody who's watching who is working with this kind of model, if this has worked. And also, you talked about some really interesting kind of different opportunities for running events. So if anybody's running events in these kind of models, I'd love to hear in the chat as well. So just leave us a comment so we understand if this is happening with you as well. But I wanted to get back to kind of these models and these opportunities. Why is this important? Why do you think this is a big trend going forward? Does it change things significantly? I mean, we talked a little bit about event formats. Why is that so important?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this comes back to the return on investment. So let's unpack that for a moment, because that's a term that's, I think, overused. Return on investment means you have a very personal sense of what your objective is as an attendee, as a sponsor, an exhibitor, or speaker, participating in any of those roles at an event. And your objective could be to get conversations, make new network, build out your network for new prospects, for instance, to start buying from you if you're exhibiting. It could be as a speaker to get a chance to get your research across and get early feedback from your peers that allows you to proceed with your research and get it published in peer-reviewed journals. And as an attendee, your objective may be to be inspired, advance your career if you're a young professional, and so on. So there are different very personal senses of objectives that people have. And we've been, I think, giving in the traditional live event formats, we've put a lot of pressure on anyone to get that return in that space, very defined by the location and the time, right? So now unlocking the opportunity of pre and post event engagement around the content and everything that comes by. Allows much longer engagement, and as a return, a much stronger return on that kind of investment. I think that's what's ultimately driving this trend, and it's going to drive the content, going to drive this trend, because people are more aware of time, and companies are more aware of how to spend their money.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we can get caught into this kind of, we can do some pretty things with content, so let's do that. But if it doesn't provide ROI, then it doesn't make sense to sponsors, to exhibitors, to people involved in the event, to researchers, etc. I see a note from Tasman Treasure Jones. She says, very much agree on the value of the flipped classroom model. It's great to see that model coming from education into events. So I think she's had some experience with this as well. Yeah. Really interesting. So you also mentioned kind of, we need to get this right? It's not so easy to get this kind of on-demand content, the sequence and how we produce it, etc. What advice do you have for people about, getting on-demand content right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So there's a lot here, right? So we only have limited time, but let's try to address a few things. First of all, you, as an organizer, you want to get back to your core objective. Really identify what's the objective. And that's a very different objective for a corporate event than for an association event, a scientific conference or a medical conference. we predominantly deliver our product for scientific medical conferences. And I personally have spoken as a researcher in my previous life, if you like, at scientific conferences. And to get back to that objective and to really understand how, for instance, you can use the tools that are now available to you to offer all the ways for attendees and all the different stakeholders to get to reach those objectives. I think that's the ultimate task of an event planner. And that may sound like it's a very daunting, challenging task, and of course it is. But of course you have event tech to help you, for instance, to record the content and to make it easy to chop it into smaller pieces, to make it more easily digestible, make it easier to search, allow for transcriptions and subtitles and translations, to make it easier for people to find and then engage with that on demand. So it's really, I think, the everlasting objective of an event professional of staying true to what you hope to achieve with your event, plus the now increasing tool set that is being offered to you by event tech that allows you to do that. Getting those two things together, that's, I think, the challenge moving forward.
Perfect. So I want to come to a couple of comments, or a few comments that we've had in the platform, which is great. Thank you very much for those who commented. Sherry says, I've been doing this for years in educational conferences for academia. It enhances the conference. So I think she's very much in agreement with you. Christine says, yes, we've done it for a recent training event meeting series, and it definitely helps heighten engagement as we have time to digest the content and come with questions. The information is then more absorbed overall. Great comment as well, I think. And Inga says, with everyone creating digital content about the same subjects all the time, this is the case in our industry, but I guess it's happening in other industries, how can you be different from all the rest? The internet was already full of content, and now in-person content sharing is turning digital too. Wow, a lot to unpack here. How can this stay relevant? We are struggling to make new content. So on demand or not, if the content is not special enough, it's difficult to get attention.
Gotcha.
I think it's really great.
Can I comment on that last one? Because it seems that a lot of members in the audience are recognizing this trend and buying into this. And this last comment, from me, delivering a technology platform for scientific and medical conferences is at those conferences, the content is what drives the event. It's the purpose why these events are being held in the first place, and it's why the community publishes research and wants to get it published and presented at those conferences. So the content is that is the conference. There's no question in anyone's mind, or how can we get original content? So this is clearly a trend that applies to those types of events, while it may come less natural to other types of events. Although we have seen great examples of that. For instance, Salesforce, they have their Dreamforce conference, their Dreamforce event, and now they have their stream. They have their Plus, Netflix-like platform, where they have done an incredible job of making the content accessible and beautiful. So you really want to get into that. But yeah, I think that does take an extra level of production, where for scientific medical conferences, it almost comes naturally to what you're already doing.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to have to wrap up, and I'd love to see the illustration of the session, because I think we covered a lot of really interesting ground. Thank you, Raquel. Here we go in the bottom right corner, entering the golden age of on-demand content. And there we have it, a sort of Netflix approach. Absolutely. It does sound like this is something worth doing, and that event professionals can be part of the solution, but they may need to partner with other people to get that content right. They're not always the content experts, if I'm reading what you're saying well. Jelmer, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing this important topic to us, and thank you for being a sponsor of this event.
Thanks, Miguel. Take care.